I didn't realize my marriage had rules until I broke one without knowing it existed. The rule wasn't about cheating or money or loyalty. It was simpler. Don't question the version of reality she's already decided on. We'd been married for 8 years. People said we were solid, low drama, emotionally intelligent. I believed that too. I thought the calm meant safety. I didn't understand that calm can also be enforced. Looking back, the problem wasn't that we didn't fight. It was that only one of us was allowed to be right, and it wasn't me. She always stayed composed. If I was upset, she'd ask me to explain myself slowly, like I was a child who needed help organizing thoughts. If I raised a concern, she'd nod and say, "I hear you," before explaining why I was misunderstanding her. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Every disagreement ended the same way, with me apologizing for my tone, my timing, or my interpretation. I told myself that was maturity. I didn't realize I was slowly learning not to trust my own reactions. The first crack appeared when she started talking about honesty more than usual. Not confessing, lecturing. She'd say things like, "I value transparency so much," or "I could never lie to you." It sounded reassuring until it started sounding rehearsed. Around the same time, she became protective of her phone, but in a subtle way, not hiding it, just always holding it. If I glanced at the screen, she'd joke about privacy. I laughed along. I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't know I was already being positioned as one. I found out by accident. We shared a laptop, and one night I opened a browser to order something. An account was already logged in. Not hers. Not mine. A messaging app one didn't recognize. I froze. The messages weren't explicit, but they were intimate, familiar. The kind of tone you don't use with someone you just met. My hands were shaking, but I still tried to rationalize it. When I asked her about it, she didn't deny it. She sighed, like she'd been waiting for this inconvenience to surface. She said it wasn't cheating. She said it was connection. She said labels were outdated. According to her, what she had with him was emotional support she didn't feel safe asking me for. When I asked why she hid it, she said she knew I'd react like this. Hurt, confused, emotional. My reaction, apparently, justified the secrecy. That was the moment I realized the trap. Anything I felt became evidence against me. And the more I tried to explain my pain, the more convinced she became that I was the problem. The days after that conversation felt unreal. She moved through the house like everything had settled into place, like we'd crossed some necessary threshold. I felt like I was walking on a floor that hadn't fully hardened yet. Every time I tried to bring it up, she'd gently interrupt and say we were going in circles. She suggested we focus on solutions, not feelings. When I said my feelings were the issue, she smiled sadly and told me I was being unfair to both of us. It was always framed as concern, never dismissal, but the result was the same. My pain had no place to land. The first real twist came when I realized she'd already prepared for this moment. She'd told her sister we'd been disconnected for years. She'd told a close friend that I struggled with emotional regulation. None of it was entirely false, but all of it was carefully edited. When those people reached out to me, they weren't asking what happened. They were checking how I was coping. I felt like I'd stepped into a version of events that had been unfolding quietly without me. I wasn't just late to the truth. I was late to the narrative. I asked her if she was still talking to him. She said yes, but only occasionally. When I asked what that meant, she accused me of fixating. She said cutting him off completely would be unhealthy and reactionary. That trust couldn't grow under ultimatums. I remember staring at her, trying to understand how my boundary had become a character flaw. She framed my request as control, even though she'd been controlling the flow of truth for months. I started to realize that honesty, to her, was something she offered selectively, never something I was allowed to require. Another twist surfaced quietly. I noticed how carefully she documented our conversations afterward. Notes on her phone. Phrases she repeated back to me later, slightly altered. When I challenged her version, she'd say, "That's not what you said," with complete confidence. I began doubting my memory. I started writing things down too, not to win arguments, but to keep myself anchored. It scared me how quickly I needed proof to trust my own recollection. That's when it hit me. I wasn't arguing about events anymore. I was fighting to keep my sense of reality intact. I tried pulling back, less explaining, fewer emotional bids. The shift was immediate. Her calm cracked into irritation. She accused me of being cold, of punishing her with distance. The same behaviors she'd praised as mature before were suddenly labeled unhealthy when they no longer served her. Watching that switch flip was clarifying. It showed me the rules had never been about growth or communication. They were about compliance. As long as I played my role, everything stayed peaceful. The decision to leave didn't come with a dramatic breaking point. It came with exhaustion. I woke up one morning and realized I was more tired of explaining myself than I was afraid of being alone. When I told her I needed space, she said I was abandoning her during a vulnerable moment. She said I was choosing fear over love. For once, I didn't argue. I packed a bag and stayed with friend. The first night away was terrifying and quiet. No conversations to manage. No emotions to justify. For the first time in years, my thoughts didn't feel wrong the moment they formed. The messages started coming the next day. Some were warm and reflective, almost loving. Others were sharp and disappointed. She said she didn't recognize me anymore, that I'd changed. She wasn't wrong, but not in the way she meant. Friends I trusted finally heard the full story. A few admitted they'd always sensed something off but couldn't explain it. One friend said quietly, "You've been walking on eggshells for years." Hearing out loud felt like permission to stop pretending everything was fine. Therapy gave me language for things I'd felt but never named. I talked about the cheating, yes, but more about the way every conversation seemed to end with me doubting myself. My therapist pointed out how often I described myself using her words. Sensitive, reactive, difficult. When asked if I felt that way outside the relationship, I didn't. That realization hurt. It meant I wasn't broken. I'd been adapting. The grief that followed wasn't just for the marriage, but for how long I'd silenced myself to keep things calm. When we finally talked about separating, it was strangely calm. She said she hoped one day I'd understand what she'd been trying to teach me, that she wished I were more open-minded. I didn't argue. I told her I needed a relationship where honesty didn't come with conditions, where my feelings weren't treated like problems to be solved. She looked disappointed, like I'd failed an important lesson. For the first time, that disappointment didn't move me. If you're reading this and something in your relationship feels confusing instead of comforting, pay attention, especially if your emotions are constantly being reframed or corrected. Love shouldn't require you to disappear to keep things peaceful. Leaving wasn't empowering in a cinematic way. It was quiet, frightening, and stabilizing. I didn't walk away because I stopped loving her. I walked away because I started trusting myself again. And if clarity feels like a threat to your relationship, that might be the clearest answer you're going to get.